when you finish listening to him talk and you go, I need 5 copies, one for me, one for everybody right now, come on up to the counter, find them there, and Steve will be signing them in the middle of the store. There's a table right there where his books are on display. So our trick is getting Steve from here to the table with, just a little bit of congratulations. Just a little bit, not too much. It's hard to let people go all the way. So one of the things I'm really thankful for, I think a few faces that I've seen in the last couple of weeks, I've heard this before, but Sonoma is such a lovely place to be an artist of any kind, and I get to deal with mostly authors, but everyone has a good support system here, and it's lovely to see how Sonoma comes out, supports people that we know. Steve is definitely a member of the community who gets back and gets in. Exactly. So that kind of support is really important, but besides that, I think my favorite part of Steve's bio that he gave me was that he's a recovery and software programmer. So we can all know that you can recover. And you can produce a great collection of short stories. Short stories are just such a little treat. It always gives a little encapsulation of life and about what can connect us all without having to sit down and read a 500-page novel. So Steve's going to tell you a little bit more about that. You can give him a big round of applause.
Thanks for coming out, everybody. Actually, I'm going to get a picture of you guys.
What?
I'm doing my hair.
Get further back.
Backs all the way out.
Yeah.
Hey.
All over a trash can. All right.
It's actually to the right, she said.
Oh.
Trash can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so thanks for coming out, you guys. Thanks for readers for having us all. And I'm going to read a couple of stories from the new book collection. And these, a lot of people here know about this already. A lot of these came about as a result of the Bump Wine Cellars literary events that we had, and a few veterans of that, Carol Allison among them. And they were sort of themed gatherings. There was one often for Halloween and one for Valentine's Day. And then over the course of doing those for a number of years, I kind of realized, and it was a great catalyst for all of us to come up with new material. I sort of realized that there was a sizable collection. And then Lisa Summers, who was sort of the co-founder of these gatherings, said, well, you ought to put these together in a book. And so I did, and here it is. There's even a picture of one of the Bump gatherings on the back cover. So I'm going to read a couple of stories here. I grew up in LA, and so some of them take place in LA, some in San Francisco, but this first one is about first arriving in LA as a young boy. It's called Googies. It had been a long, hard cross-country drive west in our boat-like 1960s Mercury cruiser. My parents could only cover a few hundred miles a day because my brother and I were always hungry or bored or needed to pee. After a half day of driving, my father would finally give in, check us into a roadside motor hotel where we would swim, eat burgers, bounce like monkeys between beds in the musty room, and then fall into exhausted sleep. The final stretch had seemed an eternity of highway. Parched plains, tin-badged sheriffs wanting payments for, we suspected, manufactured infractions, and then the haunted moonlit expanse of the Mojave Desert. My parents had purchased an after-factory AC for our new car, a rare luxury for the time, but because of it, the car was endlessly overheating. Knowing nothing about such things, my college professor father opened the hood, cars roaring past us in the starry night. He pulled out his handkerchief, loosening the radiator cap, unleashing a boiling geyser of water that blew 10 feet into the air. He howled into the night like a wounded animal. My mother applied Vicks Vapo Rub, there in case my brother or I fell ill, to his badly blistered forearm, and we continued on into the desert expanse. So after all that, it was a relief to have finally arrived, to to be in Los Angeles. We pulled in at midnight off the Harbor Freeway, our legs stiff, our butts numb. Rolling down the windows brought the distant roar of traffic, which I imagined to be the ocean. The breeze carried with it the smell of oranges and dust and other new and indefinable things. And downtown LA wasn't much back then, almost a ghost town by night. My brother whispered over to me, "It's not very nice here, is it? Not like Indiana." My mother peered out into the solitary darkness, involuntarily gathering her coat around her. I watched her tired face, lit in pale fluorescence, reflected in the car's window glass. And once again, my brother and I needed a snack and had to pee. A diner at the corner of Pershing Square glowed in the distance like a solitary oasis, neon red and fluorescent white splashing out onto the dark, oily streets. Googies, the two O's of the sign forming curious cartoon eyes. Cruising past, we saw solitary men inside hunched on red naugahyde stools, nursing cups of coffee and maybe a slice of pie. I wondered what people were doing out at that hour, and all alone. "I'm not taking the children in there," my mother said as we pulled up to the curb. "It's full of bums." My father, tired from the road and his arms still raw, growled back, "If they get hungry enough, they'll get used to it." We were the only family in the place, the young waitress giving us a booth by the window. The unearthly brightness and neon trim felt like a space station. At a nearby stool, a man nervously traced a finger along the pastel shapes etched in the countertop, stubbing out the last of a cigarette and then lighting another. But after a fountain Coke, a grilled cheese, and fries, all felt right again like the world. Even my father seemed in better spirits. We checked into our hotel, the Cloud Motel, just west of downtown. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach, but a glowing swimming pool hummed in the center courtyard, its lattice of turquoise light dancing in invitation. The next morning we all went sightseeing, billowing LA clouds against a painfully blue sky, impossibly tall palms swaying in the breeze, and the jacaranda trees in full purple bloom. It was before the era of smog, and the downtown gleamed like Oz. When we came back to our room later that afternoon, though, we found my mother's dresses and blouses inexplicably stuffed into a plastic trash can in the hall outside the door. My father's face tightened in rage. Like a detective, he slowly unlocked the door of our room. Inside, 3 men in their underwear sat at a small round table, smoking cigars and playing cards. Their wiry black chest hair spilled out from white-ribbed undershirts, and a lone woman lounged on a far chair, her legs crossed, wearing nothing but a bra and panties. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" my father snarled. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" the man who appeared to be the leader of the group shot back. My father spun out to the hall, grabbed the trash can filled with my mother's clothes, emptied the contents into the trunk of our Mercury, and then headed for the hotel office. My brother and I stood outside with my mother, her arms wrapped around us. Inside the glass enclosure, we saw my father waving his arms, his mouth contorting into vague obscenities. In response to something the desk clerk said, my father drop-kicked the plastic trash can clear across the office lobby. He'd never been good at sports, but it was an impressive shot. Minutes later, he emerged with a new room key. "There's a convention nearby," he said, his face still red, "and they needed the larger rooms. It's apparently how they do things here, but we're getting the new room for free and for the rest of the week." I looked at my parents as we made our way to the new room, trying to decide from their expressions whether this turn of events was a good thing or a bad thing. My father suggested we all put on our suits and go for a swim. "Welcome to LA," he said. And amazingly, I actually found, a lot of this is true, I actually found images online of that diner, which has since been demolished, and the actual seedy hotel.
Wow.
So
What year was that?
It was the early 60s. Yeah. And then this next one also takes place in LA in my college days. It's called Hold Me Tighter. It was the kind of place where it seemed like almost anything could happen. Sweetwater was a local dive bar and club just across tables and chairs that had seen way better days, and a bleached and feathered animal skull mounted high above the stage, like something out of an early Eagles album. My first night there, a full-blown barroom brawl erupted. The country band was halfway through Ladies Love Outlaws when someone in the packed house apparently decided to test the theory. Fists and bodies were soon flying, tables overturned and chairs thrown. And through it all, the band kept playing, the sweating masses throbbing to the raw country beat. And outlaws touch ladies somewhere deep down in their soul. My brother and I edged along the back wall as the maelstrom expanded, fists arcing just inches from our faces, until we finally made it out to the cool night air. I later started playing open mic nights there, bringing a group of guy friends along, who mainly came for the girls and the beer. I never really smoked much, but for some reason I did on those nights. It just seemed the thing to do, like in an after-sex movie scene. As I lit up after my set one night, the girl to my right tapped me on the shoulder, asked if I had an extra. I offered her one and lit it for her. She was a peach girl, low-cut tube top and faded jeans with stylishly placed hairs. She took a hungry drag on the smoke, eyeing me. "Natalie," she said, shaking hands. The headlining band was good, originals that were a cross between Elvis Costello and Leonard Cohen. Between songs we got to talking more, and then I felt Natalie's side glances on me from time to time. The band said they were taking a break, but would be right back. Just then, Natalie's girlfriend started gathering up her stuff, and the two of them began talking. A moment later, she touched me on the shoulder. "Hey, I really like this band, but my girlfriend has to head out to be up early for work. Do you think you could give me a ride if I stayed?" I nodded, said it was not a problem. We went through several more beers and most of the next set. "I should probably hit it," she said, finally, eyeing me. In the movies, when the guy meets the girl on a night out and they somehow end up leaving together, the guy buddies always watch as they go, and that happened. Smith winked and gave me a thumbs up as she and I headed to the door. Somehow it never even seemed a question that I would come in. It just felt like a given. But as we were about to enter her apartment, Natalie suddenly held a conspiratorial finger to her lips. "You need to hide out while I pay the babysitter," she whispered. My eyes widened. With no further explanation, she accordioned the hall closet and nudged me inside. Surrounded by jackets and sweaters in the dark space, I looked out through the wooden slats onto the dimly lit hall. I heard Natalie trading verbal notes with what sounded like a teenage girl. She thanked her finally, and I wondered in a panic whether the girl might have a jacket hanging in the closet. But then I heard the front door close. I expected to soon be rescued, but then Natalie and a young boy began talking down the hall. "No, not tonight, sweetie. It's already way past your bedtime," she said. "I'll read you a story tomorrow night, I promise." More minutes passed. I was beginning to think she'd forgotten me, or was perhaps insane. But then the door finally accordioned back open. "The coast is clear," she grinned. It was a nice apartment, sofa combo, stereo system, prints of Europe on the wall, with a stunning image of the stairs of Sacré-Cœur by moonlight. She got beers from the fridge, and we sat across from one another on the sofa, doing the dance, seeing where things might lead. I slugged back some of the beer, and we talked, her eyes penetrating, almost searching. She put Warren Zevon on the turntable, rising in mournful classical guitar strings, a tale of doomed love. "Carmelita, hold me tighter, I think I'm sinking down." I took another pull of the beer and checked out the album cover. Zevon in a dinner jacket, suave, side-lit, bathed in blue. His hair was perfect. The tortured tale and the swirl of the music pulled me in, and I began reading along to the lyrics. But then as the song faded, I looked up and realized that Natalie was fast asleep. Unsure what to do at first, I finally crept over and lifted the needle from the record. Glancing back, Natalie's head rested awkwardly on the couch's side arm. She began to quietly snore. I wondered whether I should wake her. I finally took a folded blanket from the end of the couch and gently covered her. Then I went to check on the boy. The door was open and he was also sound asleep. I turned on the bathroom light so he wouldn't be afraid. Then I crept out, locking the door behind me. Stepping into the late night air, it felt like some strange dream. Some say that the heart wants what it wants, and I guess that's true. She'd taken a total stranger into her home and then passed out, leaving her young son asleep in the other room. When we first started talking that night, Natalie had jotted down her number. The next day, I found it crumpled in my pocket. I called and left a message, said I was glad we'd met, and that we should get together again, but I never heard back. A few days later, I played again at the Sweetwater open mic. I wondered whether she might be there. Over beers, the guys couldn't wait to hear what had happened, and I told them. Oh man, Smith guffawed, you dropped the sweetest little thing in this guy's lap, and he still blows it. He elbowed the others. He couldn't get it up, right? They all laughed, slapping their thighs. I smiled back, agreeing that was what had happened. And then it came my turn to play. In the movies, when things don't work out, when all hope seems lost, the girl suddenly reappears at the perfect magical moment. And there, in the blue stage light, I looked out, hoping to somehow see Natalie through the smoky haze. I paused, closed my eyes, and strummed the sad opening strains of Carmelita. And I've just got one more. This is a real short one, also in LA, back during my childhood. It's called Smell-O-Vision. Some here know this one. It was the early 1960s, and Smell-O-Vision made its debut at our local theater. Coming on the tail of the 3D movie craze, it was an in-theater system that released pre-programmed odors during a key scene of a movie, so the viewer could literally smell the story. Gun barrel-sized metal tubes were mounted at the back of each theater seat with a small hole at the tip. At pivotal moments in the film, the barrel in front of you would softly hiss, emitting an aroma for that particular scene. A bouquet of roses, a cigarette, a woman's perfume, a sizzling steak, or gun smoke after a wild shootout. We'd read in the paper that audiences would soon come to anticipate each new aroma as the story unfolded, with whispered amazement at the realism and immersion of the new medium. I went with my parents on opening night. Because we were running late, we hadn't had time for dinner. My father said that we could all grab something afterward, but I told him I couldn't wait. So he bought me a warmed-over hot dog and chili fries from the theater snack counter. I wolfed it down in the neon-trimmed lobby, and then we made our way into the packed house, ready to go. But it soon became apparent that things weren't sitting well. My intestines began to churn, like there was something alive in there. It was all I could do to hold things in. I was getting increasingly desperate, but there was finally a particularly noisy scene in the film, with clattering city traffic and honking car horns. Sensing my opportunity, I leaned up to one side, slowly letting it out. I figured that if anyone heard, they might just think it had been the Smell-O-Vision barrel in front of me. Mission accomplished. But just then, the movie cut to an indoor hotel scene with a group of unkempt, gangster-looking men in undershirts, drinking, scratching their hairy chests, plotting a revenge hit. What I'd just done slowly wafted out into the theater. People nearby began shifting in their seats, heatedly whispering to one another. "Oh man," I heard someone exclaim. Expressions of disbelief soon turned to revulsion and horror. A woman nearby held a lace handkerchief up to her face. "Well, I never," she said to her husband. "Really, they're actually doing that?" said another man. People began fanning their Smell-O-Vision brochures in front of their faces. I pinched myself, trying hard not to laugh. When the film was over, I heard a man in the lobby complaining to the theater manager. "Smells like that in a movie? Are you serious? That was totally uncool, man." "Was that you?" my father whispered as we headed out the lobby door, a look of fiendish delight on his face. I nodded sheepishly, and he discreetly high-fived me. Smell-O-Vision only lasted a year or two afterward, soon dying an early death. But I've often wondered whether I helped bring it down. So that's it, guys. Any thoughts or comments or questions? Yeah?
The title?
Oh, yeah. Good question. So one of the stories here, it mentions in the back that in my mid-20s, for a period of time, like about 6 weeks, I was a European busker, which is a street musician with my brother. And we did that in London and Paris and Berlin. And so one of the stories, one of the stories takes place during that period. But the title story pertains to one that, and it was a little too long to read here. You know, some of them would lend themselves to the time that we have. The title story pertains to a wild, almost, if anybody's seen the TV show Mad Men, my father was a college professor, and it was a very Mad Men-like faculty party. And I was 15 years old, and my father hired like a college kid to be the bartender, and he was secretly plying me and my brother with like sherry at this gathering. So it was the first time I ever got drunk, and it proved to be a very wild night, culminating. Well, I won't give it all away. But anyway, part of that, there's an old folk blues standard song called St. James Infirmary. It's been recorded by a lot of people. Recorded by Cab Calloway and Van Morrison. There's an actual book, a whole book about that song, and because it's been recorded by so many people. So my mother during World War II lived in Greenwich Village, and her roommate was friends with this quite famous folk singer at the time, Josh White. So I grew up listening to his music, and you know, my mom would come home from work and there would be Josh White in their kitchen. It would be like in the 60s if you came home and Bob Dylan was in your kitchen. That was what it was like. So I grew up listening to that, and this title story revolves kind of around her and the era of proto liberated women who then got sucked into suburbia and being housewives, and her sort of bristling at that. And so and then also I realized in putting these stories together that there was kind of an underlying theme with a lot of them of kind of wounded people, if you will, in need of care. So those two things, the song and the sort of overarching nature of the songs, I thought that was a good title for it. So good question. Any others?
Are you going to do an audiobook?
I've been thinking of it, and the publisher is hip to that, so yeah.
I mean, I've been lucky to hear you read so much, and so when I read your printed word, I
you
hear
think
you.
Of me, you think of me, I think that's a good idea, so yeah, I should do that. Any others?
I want to riff on what Carol just said.
Yeah.
Which is, how many of you have already heard the short introduction?
Which one?
Could you read that? About bump celery?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Great.
Yeah, this is kind of how the book came about. Yeah, it has a great tale about. And in those days, were you there for the Jonah one?
That I missed that one.
Okay.
I was the one after that.
Carol and I came in a little later into the fold. So yeah, this is the intro. A few years back, I attended a San Francisco lit gathering with my Sonoma writer friend Lisa Summers. We heard many inspired readings and performances, but during one of them, Lisa leaned over and whispered, "You know, there are plenty of great writers in Sonoma. We could put on a local version of this." And so she did. Unlike so many offhand comments or great ideas, she actually made it happen. Beginning in 2014, Lisa and Daedalus Howell, a North Bay writer and filmmaker, assembled quarterly events with their Sonoma Writers Workshop group, held at Bump Wine Cellars off of Sonoma Plaza. The inaugural night's theme was Naked and Drunk. The lineup including Daedalus, A.J. Peterson, Jonah Raskin, Lisa Summers, Stacy Toole, and several open mic readers. It was a gathering worthy of a wine-fueled Kerouac-era North Beach event. During a particularly frenzied beat-style reading by Jonah Raskin, a wild man writer and former Sonoma State professor, he first stripped off his t-shirt, then his pants, and finally his briefs. Mindful of the night's theme, he laid bare the words and the skin. "Don't ever do that again," Lisa told him afterwards.
That's why I go back.
And the next event, he showed up in a pink taffeta tutu.
Yeah. I'm pro Jonah.
Yeah, but it was a
He was in a
memorable.
wedding dress.
Yeah, that's true. He wore a wedding dress too. A year or so later, I found my way into the fold along with Carol Allison and a rotating assortment of drop-in riders with Steve Shane and Steve Dellamaggiore on upright bass and accordion, providing coffeehouse-style musical backing. It's often said that necessity is the mother of invention. The boat gatherings have been an essential catalyst for these stories. After several years of such readings, I one day recognized I'd amassed a fairly sizable collection. A shout out as well to Deb Carlin, former editor of the Sonoma Valley Sun's Creative Arts section, which first published several of these pieces, and also to Evan Karp and his Quiet Lighting events in San Francisco. Special thanks additionally to Sarah Ford and Lisa Summers for their stellar copy editing, and to Mieko and Jordy of Bump Sellers for seasonally surrendering their wonderful tasting room to a circus of literary crazies. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, my brother and I co-wrote a novel about 10 years ago.
Great novel.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Very
thanks.
good.
Yeah,
It's a shroud. I
Yeah.
recommend it.
yeah.
Yes.
What's the title of that?
It's called The Shroud.
Shroud.
It's kind of like almost speculative sci-fi. Has to do with sequencing blood from the Shroud of Turin and then potentially cloning.
So I grew up in LA too, and I didn't realize that the rest of the world didn't have serial killers growing up
Yeah.
until recently, and I started watching, and I was like, wait, it was only me.
Yeah.
Do you have serial killers in there?
No, there's no serial.
Well, there is.
Next
Oh,
one.
there's
The
the.
ranch.
Oh, yeah,
Ranch.
actually, there's one here that's, thanks. You
Because that's unique to growing up in LA, I found out. I mean, there's like the Boston Strangler, but we had a lot of serial killers.
Well, one of these stories takes place, and this was told to me by a secretary who was older than me when I had a college job. Back when she was in high school, going to the Manson Ranch just weeks before the murders, and I won't give it away, having a
My
very
mom almost
creepy.
joined the Manson.
Oh my God!
I'll tell that story outside later.
Yeah.
It was your party.
So this woman had like a really scary experience going there, and then just a couple of weeks later was the murders. Yeah. So there's a near serial killer.
Yeah, because that was our life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like when I was a kid,
The Zodiac Killer.
at lunch,
Well,
our
that was
game
a-
was
that was a-
look for the killers. Like we would hunt serial killers
Yeah,
like
yeah.
as our game at lunch. And then I grew up and I was like, other people didn't do that.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, they did. Yeah, but they did actually have the Zodiac up here. But,
yeah, it was
anything else? Any other?
I got time.
Yeah. Are we running out? Yeah.
One more.
Okay. One more question, I guess.
I actually just read The Dancer for the first time last night, and that's a heavy one too.
Yeah,
I'd say
yeah.
those two are the
Yeah.
Ranch and The Dancer, but was
That's
that?
true. That is also greatly based in fact. That was told from the perspective of this woman, but it was actually me that happened to. And I pieced all of that together afterwards talking to the cops. This woman was, to set it up a little bit without giving anything away, was sort of dancing around out in the traffic saying like, help me, and then wanted money, and because her car was supposedly stalled up on the overpass, and then just in talking with her, at a certain point I asked to see her driver's license, and I just saw this flash of menace in her eyes, and I thought, she is armed, absolutely, she's packing some kind of weapon, because she just looked so menacing in the way she looked at me when I asked for her license. I thought, holy shit. Yeah, and that proved to be true when I talked to the cops. I won't give any more away. So, yeah. So I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.